Hi, I'm Gerard Tellis. I'm the Neely Chaired Professor of American Enterprise, the Director of the Center for Global Innovation, and the Director of the Institute of Outlier Research and Marketing at the USC Marshall School of Business. Today, I'll talk about why US governors delayed action in the fight against COVID-19. In the US, a central figure in the fight against COVID-19 is Dr. Fauci. He is the director of the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases. On April 2nd, a reporter asked him whether US states should all order lockdowns. He replied, "I just don't understand why that's not happening." We sought to answer that question, which so frustrated Dr. Fauci. Now, the US is a federation of 50 states, each of which has jurisdiction over health issues. The US had no mandated lockdown, so US governors ordered lockdown at different times. And this pattern of behavior created the world's biggest experiment on COVID-19 control. 50 different governors behaving differently at different times. We sought to answer why governors varied in their response. Whether or not to lock down a state is a complex, difficult decision. 4 theories provide clues to understand how governors made this decision. These theories are medical science, social learning, information cascades, and political polarization. In the next few minutes, I will discuss each of these theories. COVID-19 is a highly infectious disease. It is spread by secretions from an infected person's mouth or nose. These secretions may pass directly on touch or through air or on objects. There are only 3 ways to control the spread of this disease: a vaccine, a curative drug, or testing all subjects, tracing their contacts, and quarantining those who are infected. In the absence of these 3 alternatives, the only visible and enforceable way to control the spread of the disease is by a lockdown. One simple measure of the spread of the disease is the cumulative number of cases in a state divided by the population of the state. We call that the penetration of the disease in the state. If governors were going purely by medical science, then the higher the number of penetration of cases in the state, the more likely the governor would be to lock down that state. However, lockdowns have huge benefits and costs. The benefits include saving lives, hospitalizations, illnesses, suffering. And all of these are in the medium to long term because the illness has a 14-day gestation period. On the other hand, the costs occur immediately, and they include closure or failure of businesses and loss of salaries and jobs to their employees. Now, in the US, there's intense political polarization between Democrats and Republicans, and they have different value systems regarding these costs and benefits. Democrats are more focused on health benefits, whilst Republicans are more focused on economic and business costs. So we would expect Republican governors to delay lockdowns in fear of incurring huge economic costs, and they may order lockdowns later than would Democratic governors. Now, the US has not had a major epidemic for almost a century. The last one was the Spanish flu about 100 years back. As a result, governors and their advisors were not knowledgeable of the speed at which a virus spreads and the difficulty of controlling it. So they had to learn from trial and error and from the experience of governors who acted or didn't act before them. As a result, we would expect governors whose states had the disease early on to take a long time to act, while those whose states were afflicted later would act more promptly. A fourth potential explanation is information cascades. When facing uncertainty about the trade-off in costs and benefits of a lockdown, governors on the fence would look for clues from others. A governor of an important state might act early on because of the pressures on him or her. Others looking up to that governor for leadership would then act, and still other states might follow those. As a result, we will see a mini cascade in the actions of some states. How well do these different theories explain lockdowns? We try to answer that question with hard data. There are two types of data: the data about the spread of the disease, and we get that from Johns Hopkins Medical Center, Flevy.com, and Worldometer, and the data about the demographics of the states, including the gross domestic product, the population density, the largest city, the city air traffic, and the density of the largest city. And we get all of these variables, which we call the control variables, from the US Census. We get the timing of governors' actions from news reports and from websites of the various states. And now let me present some results. So this is the first of our results. It's a graphical result, and it explains lockdowns by time and party affiliation. On the horizontal axis is time till the first case in the state. It tells how soon or how late the state was afflicted by COVID-19. On the vertical axis is the time to lockdown from the date of infection, of first infection. Each state is represented by a dot, and Democratic states are represented by a blue dot, and Republican states are represented by a red dot. The dark blue and red dots are states that have acted as of April 15th. The light pink dots are states that have not acted as of that date. Now notice that the various states lie pretty neatly across a trend line which is going from top left to bottom right. And the states lie close to this trend line, implying that this single trend line explains a lot of the variation in states' action. What this graph clearly shows is that states that were early in time to get the disease took a long time to issue a lockdown, whereas states that were later in time to get the disease were very quick to have a lockdown. This clearly shows there was learning between governors of states. For example, Washington was the first state to have infection in the US, and it took the governor over 60 days to have a lockdown. On the other hand, Virginia was very late. It was the last state to have the first case of COVID-19. And the governor acted very quickly in just 7 days. So you can see the dramatic effect of learning in this graph. You can also see a small effect of polarization in that more of the blue spots, the Democratic governors, are below this trend line, and more of the pink spots, the Republican governors, are over the trend line. That means they are taking longer to act. Finally, for the last few weeks, all the governors who have not acted are Republican. That shows that they are leaning very strongly on the side of economic costs over health issues. The next graph I'm going to show you is the effect of mini cascades and party affiliation on lockdowns. On the horizontal axis is time, going from 18th March to 7th April. On the vertical axis is the number of states announcing lockdowns. And we see here, each state is a dot. We see here that on 19th March, just one state ordered the lockdown. Immediately it was followed on 20th by 3 states, then by 2 states, then by 4 states, and then by 7 states. This is a pretty good sign of mini cascades. Also, in the first of this mini cascades, most of the governors acting were Democratic, implying that they took their cue from other Democratic governors acting before them. We see a second mini cascade around the 30th of March, where in 3 days, 11 governors ordered lockdowns. Now, these two graphs show the effect of mini cascades, learning, and party affiliation on lockdown. They do not control for the demographics of the state and for the degree of penetration of the disease in each state. In order to do so, we need a formal model, which I turn to next. To control for the effects of all variables simultaneously and see the effect of each one individually on a governor's action, we use what is called a hazard model. Now, the hazard is the probability of a lockdown given that it has not occurred until then. This model comes from the actuarial and medical sciences. We use 4 variables to explain the hazard of a lockdown based on our 4 theories which we have been talking about, namely the proportion of cumulative cases in the population, the time till the first case in the state, the number of governors acting in the prior 4 days, and whether the governor was Democrat or Republican. We also control for GDP, that's gross domestic product, population, density, biggest cities, population, and air traffic of the biggest city. Here are the results of the hazard model. On the horizontal axis is the estimates of the hazard, which is the increase in likelihood of a lockdown. On the vertical axis is the variable which has an influence. All the control variables had no influence and were not what we say statistically significant. On the other hand, our 4 theoretical variables were all statistically significant. Now let me explain the meaning of each of the bars. The first purple bar is the effect of the lateness at which the first case occurred in a state. It says that for every day later that a case got COVID-19, it was 1.5 times more likely to order a lockdown than another state. This is a huge effect because it is in terms of days. And this effect reflects learning among governors of the states. The second red bar is the effect of the number of states ordering lockdowns in the prior 3 days. That effect is also 1.5, meaning for every state in the prior 3 days ordering a lockdown, a state that had not ordered one was 1.5 times more likely to do so. This effect reflects mini cascades. The blue bar is the effect of party affiliation, where Democrats are 1, Republicans are 0. That effect is about 2.7, which means that Democratic governors are 2.7 times more likely to order a lockdown than Republican governors. And finally, the last bar, green bar, is the effect of the penetration of the disease in the population. And that has the smallest effect of just 1, that is no more or less likely than other state to order a lockdown. And this is the effect of governors deciding on medical science about whether or not they should order lockdowns. To get a better feel of the effect of learning, here are 4 examples of 3 states who were at the extreme of the decision to order lockdowns. So the longest to order a lockdown was Arizona. It took 65 days from the first infection in the state, with a penetration of 1 or 2 infections per million population. On the other hand, the quickest to order lockdowns was West Virginia, which took just 7 days, with a penetration of just 12 cases per million population. The highest penetration at lockdown was New York, with a penetration of 812 cases per million population. And the lowest penetration on lockdown was West Virginia, with only 12 cases per million population. A question that may arise in your minds is, with such huge differences in timing as well as in penetration levels of ordering lockdowns, what were the consequences for states? That indeed is our research topic, which we will undertake next. And I want to summarize the major findings from this study. Firstly, medical theory of disease provides the smallest explanation of the uncertainty in governors' actions. Secondly, behavioral theories of social learning, political polarization, and information cascades provides much of the explanation for uncertainty in governors' actions. Here are the main takeaways from this research. In the absence of mandatory uniform US federal action as regards lockdowns, the governors were on their own, and their decisions were influenced by political polarization, social learning, and mini cascades, rather than only by medical science. Now, this is by no means meant to be a judgment on anyone's behavior. This is merely an objective look at the data. And we have looked at this data by simple graphs, by a few examples, as well as by a formal, rigorous hazard model analysis. Obviously, others might look at the same data and come to different conclusions. Our paper is published in an open forum called SSRN. Anyone can read the data, criticize it, comment on it, or try to replicate it and draw other conclusions. Here are some policy questions that the audience or researchers may discuss. Was leaving the decision to states wise or costly? Should decisions be left purely to the CDC, that is the Center for Disease Control? In a trade-off between health and economics, which should win? While I leave you with these questions, they are also ones we are going to address with these and other data, and we will probably have answers in a couple of weeks. Thank you for sparing your time. As I said, our paper is available online at SSRN, and our co-authors are Nitish Sood and Ashish Sood.